Organised crime. It's assumed that organised criminal groups are heavily implicated in trafficking persons, and I put some references on there. But as with any other criminal activity, evidence is very hard to come by. The assumption remains relatively untested, therefore. As response to trafficking in person continues to grow both globally and nationally, increased information is available about the people involved in the trafficking process, the level of organisation, offending methods, and their connections with other forms of criminality. So this is where we're building up our information spider's web to match our criminal activity spider's web. So what we want is the two to kind of overlay so that we understand the mechanisms, the interactions, the interconnections between all of these activities, who's perpetrating it. The real criminals here are not people being smuggled. As with every other criminal activity with drug users or whatever, they are the victims here, and it's really the organised criminals that need to be tackled to prevent this from happening. Picture is beginning to emerge from this information, and it's increasingly complex. It appears there is considerable diversity in the characteristics, criminal histories of the offenders, the length and scope of operations, how they undertake it, the modus operandi, and their motives. Although obviously the motives are going to be for most of these individuals financial. It's important to understand these characteristics if strategies are going to be developed to combat trafficking in persons, and if they are going to be effective. If we don't understand the what, the why, the who, the how of these crimes, then how are we actually going to combat this? It's not going to be an effective control measure. Enduring debates about precise nature and definition of organised crime continue. In the context of trafficking in persons, however, a critical legal definition that provides a useful starting point on this issue is Definition of Organised Criminal Groups in the United Nations Against Transnational Organised Crime. That's from a 2000 United Nations document referenced at the end. All the link is here, you go straight to it online. It does not contain a definition of organised crime. However, the Convention defines organised crime as, now we've seen this before, and I want you to have a very clear idea of what organised crime is. So we're going to keep repeating this at suitable times throughout the whole unit. It's a structured group of 3 or more persons existing for a period of time and acting in concert with the aim of committing one or more serious crimes or offences established in accordance with this Convention, in order to obtain, directly or indirectly, a financial or other material benefit. Now, as we've mentioned before, this is a very wide-ranging definition, and it's really meant to cover all bases of what organised criminal activity could include. It also provides a legal framework within which countries have agreed to work together to combat certain forms of transnational organised crime, including participation in organised criminal groups, money laundering, corruption, obstruction of justice, serious crimes, which are by definition those that attract a penalty of 4 years or more in prison, and offences established by various protocols which were agreed under the framework of the Convention, including the Smuggling Protocol. The literature around this issue concludes that Australia and international literature note an intersection between the services provided by intermediaries and the migration process, such as the provision of recruitment and migration services, and those involved in trafficking persons. And the literature suggests potential overlap between at least some of the migrant smuggling, such as organised visa fraud, and trafficking in persons. So we're seeing a link here between migrant smuggling, so those paying smugglers to travel abroad for a better life, and trafficking, those being coerced or threatened and sold into basically slavery or sold for their organs, so they're moved as a commodity, whereas the migrant is paying for the service. Remember the difference, it's very important. But there's potential overlap between the two. You may start as a migrant being smuggled and end up as a person being trafficked for other means by the smugglers. When assessing the literature on specific geographic contexts or locations, there is an indication of overlaps between trafficking criminality and other forms of non-migration related criminality, such as organised fraud and drug trafficking. The links are obvious. If you're going to traffic people and you have routes and mechanisms and networks that work, why would you not use that to traffic other items such as firearms or drugs? The connections have not been noted in the Australian context as yet, but it's unlikely that organised criminal gangs are not exploiting every opportunity. So simply because Australia hasn't actually seen, and there's no documented evidence supporting these links, criminal action is very exploitative, it's organic, and they will be using every mechanism for the high profit that is low risk, and certainly human trafficking and people smuggling comes into that category.